While Anya's doing that, let me take a moment to acknowledge her because this is our first meeting without our training wheels. We don't have Mark Moss running this meeting this evening. We've got Community Board 14 in the capable hands of Anya Hoyer running this meeting this evening.
Here, here.
And so give her your patience and support.
Anya's the best. She's
Yeah.
got this.
Right on.
Thanks, you guys. All right, we are live, and I will be posting the link for the budget document. So take it away, Ed.
Thank you, Anya, and welcome everybody to this Budget Committee meeting of Community Board 14. We're getting started at 6:33 p.m. My role is quite limited, thank goodness. I have the pleasure and the opportunity to turn the meeting over at this point to our illustrious district manager, Sean Campbell.
Wow, that was nice. Thanks, Ed. So every year we have a budget committee meeting in advance of our public hearing, and this is to review the budget priorities that we will be requesting of city agencies, in the FY22 fiscal budget. This year, for reasons we all know, is a very different year from previous years. The budget that we're talking about right now has about a $9 billion shortfall. Agencies have been cut drastically. Community boards have not been held harmless from those cuts for the first time, maybe ever. And so, and in this COVID recovery period that includes an economic recovery period, I think that I've tried to frame the budget requests in such a way as to prioritize those concerns and those necessities. I've also pointed out when I could that had this community board been granted some of the priorities, some of the requests that we had made in previous years, some of the impacts of COVID would not have been so harsh. And that these are not requests for fancy things. These are requests that benefit our community and sustain our community and make our community resilient in difficult times. And so, so with that in mind, Anya, if you could go ahead and put up the preliminary budget register from FY21, because it's still what we worked off of. And while that's going up on the screen, these requests come from the previous year's document, are the consultations that I've spoken about at recent board meetings and the like, with, I think we have, oh gosh, I can't remember now, something like 20 different city agencies. And then our own district needs as recognized service delivery and input from community members. So without further ado, our priority, so we're going to start with a capital budget and then go into the expense items for no reason other than that's how it's laid out by OMB. And last year, our first budget request was to renovate or upgrade the existing precinct house. The reason why that was a high priority last year is because it's been on our budget request list for something like 3 decades. And there was actually some movement by NYPD to begin the process of, it's recognized as a need by NYPD. So there was some effort put into to begin the process of reviewing the possibilities for the precinct house. And they did, you might remember, they completed a scoping study in 2018, where they spent $1 million to determine whether or not they could rip down the current building and build a new one there. They figured out that they actually could do that, but that it would not solve the parking and traffic situation, nor would it help to relocate the precinct in a place that had more rationale, which is something that we could have told them for $10 instead of $1 million. But then, so the recommendation was for OMB to conduct a site study. And OMB has not funded that yet, but I think we should maintain it in the budget, especially since, it is something that NYPD has recognized as a need, but lower their priority since we know it's not coming this year, and that there might be more urgent requests more closely related to more immediate needs. And then there were some other capital requests to maintain, and I'm going to move those to expense, to maintain the precinct building so that it is good working order. And Anya, I'm sorry, I don't know if that's, somebody's trying to text me. I can't find my phone. I also can't look at the phone and speak at the same time, but the presentation is not up on the screen. I don't know if that's so we might be having technical difficulties. Holds. A reminder, severely rent overburden means the family is paying more than 50% of their income on their rent. 35 to 37% of our residents do that. And it's even higher in our families that live in poverty, have a higher percentage of living severely rent overburdened, which I guess makes economic sense. So we will have a conversation fairly soon with HPD and EDC about the development of the lot on Bedford Avenue, Bedford and Church, which is going to be a 100% affordable housing development. And it was announced in tandem with Councilmember Eugene a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to change that to. The new, oh, and then this is one last new request. And then if there's something that you feel we need that is a capital improvement that I haven't mentioned, shout it out. But the Department of Environmental Protection actually requested support for the development of their wastewater tools. They're working with some institutions of higher education, University of Michigan being one of them, NYU being another, and they're developing a molecular monitoring technologies, and this is they're going to monitor sewage in response to the health crisis, because they would be able to inform data as to where there are spikes, where there are concerns, and they're working with those institutions of higher learning as well as with Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to ensure that their data match what DOH needs to measure. So I thought that was interesting, and if they're looking for support on the development of that, that seems to fall into our, the mission of ensuring public health and economic recovery. So I think we should put that in there to support the request. That's all for capital.
Just a question, Sean, on the issue of cameras. Do we have anything for like red light cameras or like speeding cameras, anything like that?
No. Do we want to add that into the list with DOT? I mean, they have such a pattern for how they're installing them, schools first and all of that. But if you should we specify locations? That's what they'll tell us to do, frankly.
I just don't know, like, where I know where some are, but I
I'm gonna say Steve Cohen with like a list of all the
Me too.
I know when I see the cars going in the other direction and the lights flash, then I know where they are. But yeah, other than that,
I mean, maybe there's a formula by which we could say, is our camera installation to offending vehicles ratio, similar to that across the borough? Or have we noticed that the number of offending vehicles has dropped since the installation of cameras, which would suggest that they're working? Or I could try to get that information, and then maybe, in some other, I don't know if we'd necessarily need to put it in a budget because they have the budget for it. It would just be directing those resources to our community because our ratios are not as good as the ratios elsewhere, something like that. Does that make sense?
sounds good to me.
Not exactly, because that means there may be more cameras trying to catch us speeding and so forth. So,
I just want to point. This is Dwayne. I just want to point out our own traffic study done by, I think it was a few years ago. Sean, we did our planning fellow did a study, and found that speeding was actually not a major issue in our community board district. So
The
our
problem
own
with
le-
that study is I think that was just sort of observation on the base. I think that was just what was observed on certain corners where they were looking. I'm not sure.
well, that was the assessment around the speed bumps and whether or not they were necessary and what the
Yeah, that was a
actual
speed hump study, yeah.
yeah. So that was the one around like what were the actual causes or reasons, top reasons for crashes or traffic incidents in the district. And I think one of the things that came out surprising to all of us was that speeding was not an actual major issue as it related to like vehicle involved incidents in the
Yeah.
district. So
Joanne, I'll take another look at that because I think that wasn't, I don't know if that, I can't remember the methodology and the scope of that observation. And then, you know, that was followed a couple years later by us having one of the highest death rates in the city when Coney Island Avenue became a corridor of great concern.
right.
So it's fun.
I'm-
It's really, it's interesting how fluid this is.
I'm just bringing it up as a point of our own study may shoot us in the behind there, as far as wanting to help Steve find out where all the traffic cameras are.
Right on.
There's been since COVID, because, you know, a lot of streets are not as traffic, become actually much more aggressive in this speeding, and it is an issue. And there've been an increase in people getting hit and killed as a result. So benign.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll pursue that for sure. I'm going to move on to capital budget, and there's even more items here than there are on the other, and I know we're already an hour in, so I'll try to speak quickly. And I can skip a couple things if you know you don't need the whole background on it. But the first thing I want to say, oh gosh, there's two first things I want to say. I'll start with sanitation because I mentioned it already before. The cuts to sanitation were the most obvious and detrimental, at least in the short term, and at least in terms of, you know, what we were able to, you know, complaints that we get and what we're all able to see on the street. So I'm going to give you some numbers that the new commissioner, Commissioner Grayson, who is just brilliant. He's the only commissioner to come to a budget consultation this year. But this is what happened. Everybody's budget got cut, but nobody got cut so severely in their day-to-day service operations as sanitation. They took a 63 effective cut in service frequency. They reduced the baseline litter basket. Remember, we used to fight every year for more litter basket collection. We finally got up to 6 days a week. We're back down to 2, 3 in some places. They totally eliminated holiday litter basket collection and Sunday litter basket collection. They eliminated, remember I talked about rats, they eliminated litter basket service associated with rat mitigation. They eliminated dedicated syringe litter patrol. They totally eliminated what's called MLP, that's manual litter patrol. That's just when, you know, picking up when people do an illegal dump job underneath our, you know, our road bridges. We get a lot of those, especially down south. That's who goes and cleans those up. They've reduced lot cleaning by 30%. You can just ask Anya how, you know, how that's affecting the workload in the office. I think that's about it. But that is every single day. You know, I've got people noticing that there's more litter on the street and asking for more litter baskets. No, it's not going to help. We don't have anybody picking them up. So a restoration of the sanitation budget to me is when you look at what sanitation's symbol is, it's like a medical staff, you know. So they were originally formed as a public health agency. The dirtier we get, the less healthy we are, the less we want to go out and take our walks, and the more rats that we have. And so I just want to put that really high up on our list of priorities because, you know, their baseline was decimated, and and when I spoke to Joe Scalera at BK14, one of my heroes in city government, he was like, look, I have the trucks. I could send out every single Monday, he knows that his trucks are coming back full without having finished their routes. Every Monday since the cuts. And so just give him 4 more trucks, give him, 8 more guys. And sorry, they are all guys right now, but they, they don't have it. So that's just silly. It's sort of like, if you can't deal with what we know is happening, how are we going to be better prepared to deal with what we don't know what's coming?
Well, so you've got me convinced that this should be number 1 or 2.
Okay, good. The other first thing I wanted to talk about is us. I'm gonna get to my notes. So, I think that if we don't, and a number of my colleagues have talked about the fact that they've put support for community boards high up in their expense budget for years. And we kind of stick it down there around number 8. So I'm skipping ahead. It's down on number 8 on the list if you're following along. But look, we had a PEG reduction. They took $9,000 out of our budget from the previous fiscal year and $9,000 this fiscal year. We're the only city agency to have not expanded, and I mean this citywide. We're the only city agency to have not expanded since 2016. There's been no significant change in our budget. There's been minor increases. I think we went from 233 when I started to 260 something now. But there's been a substantial offloading of responsibilities. We no longer get centralized administrative support for our timekeeping. We no longer get centralized administrative support for our budgeting. We have had to be trained in the FMS system, in the passport system. There's a new SAPO system. There's a new district needs platform that I've complained about for a few years now that is always a lot of work. We have new platforms for our budget consultations with OMB, data keeping. I'm now a privacy officer in the city of New York, which means I'm just not supposed to share anybody's contact information. So the training for that and the extra reporting I have to do for that. And all the while our service requests have not diminished. They've gone up as well. What do we have, like 3,000 something on our database? We continue to get audited. We just got a new memo from the comptroller's office that we're going to be audited to ensure that we are following the open meetings law. So, and then we get tons and tons of trainings that we didn't used to have to do. And I welcome the trainings. I think they're fine. Some of them are even informative. Most of them feel a little bit silly for an office of 2. Like now, we have to finish our sexual harassment training, about our 4th sexual harassment training. So it's just a lot more with no more support. So I wanted to make that case. I feel like, I'm working with colleagues to talk about, ensuring that communities know better the utility of their community boards and use us, turn to us more often. So I wanted to move that request up. Glenn?
Hey,
Sean, what is the possibility of hiring back a 3rd person in the office?
Well, I mean, we have the budget to do it. The problem is that I don't know how to on-ramp a new person when we're not working together in the office. The training and supervision and what it means in a small office for the sort of I don't know, the environment or the way people get along without being together, because they're union positions. I just worry a little bit about that. So I was looking to hire a temp, but the city isn't supporting a temp pool right now. And so the possibility is there, and I struggle with it all the time. Like every time I'm working extra late and I'm feeling panicked that I worked all day and still feel like I don't want to put it down until I get, that sort of thing. The panic I feel when I ask Anya to do like the 19th thing, and it's not even 12 noon yet. So it's possible. It just isn't easy.
Hey, Joanne Brown here. And I think it's really important to highlight, like, all of, I'm going to quote unquote, extracurricular activities that CB14 does that are modeled by other community boards. The youth conference, the nonprofit roundtable, and all of the, additional work that it puts on the district manager and the community board staff. And those things are pivotal. They're pivotal to really creating community. And if you look at the results in our district for the census, we have really done very well given, and I 100% say that is because we have allocated our financial resources for 2 nonprofits in a row to bring in specialists to train our nonprofits to be the very best that they can be.
Yeah.
So I just think it's really important to cite those issues in the budget requests and to just talk about how effective we are.
Yeah, I think yeah, they're mentioned in their CBO roundtable. I think, and I'll make sure that that's articulated. Thanks for that. Yeah, now that I'm looking at it too, I thought another point of conversation with my colleagues is also just additional resources to enable the Public Engagement Commission, which was charter mandated. They were supposed to be assisting community boards with technical support and perhaps planning, planners for each board. So I don't think that's gotten very far, but we'll continue that. Task that. And I am going to go ahead. I think that in the days of COVID, our ability to maintain service and the work that Anya did on the website on a daily basis, to update that on a daily basis, we know that was heavily utilized. So I'm going to go ahead and ratchet that up to put that up in the top 3. Good. We can move on.
Can I jump in here?
Uh-huh.
Okay, great. Ann Gaudette. So question for you about not onboarding somebody. Are you're probably not going to be able to capture the 9,000 times 2 losses, but will you likely eclipse that person even though it really is difficult to bring somebody in remotely? So would you then lose that capacity in this budgetary climate? So I just throw that out as a consideration that you don't want to lose that because it wasn't really taken.
Yeah, I mean,
just a thought.
We can do a budget modification to turn that money into something else, or to hire a planner if we haven't hired a staff member, because I haven't, I don't like, you can ask Anya, I don't like giving any money back to the city, especially when we're turning around and asking for additional funding. The problem is that, the funding we need is really for personnel, and the funding that they gave us, I forgot to mention this, the $42,000 in the past 2 years. Actually, it sounds like a gift, but it was kind of a burden to be able to spend that on something that wasn't personnel and didn't look like, we were just going to get a pony. And other boards, most of you, I think, know the story of the board that actually bought a car with their 42, and they could legally, that wasn't illegal. It just was a little bit unseemly, but so that kind of was the way we ask last year, was we asked them to just baseline that into our budget and let us decide whether that should be OTPS or PS. But yeah, and I that's point well taken. We don't want to sit around and not use it. And maybe we could hire somebody like a consultant or, or like I said, a planning fellow or somebody for a special project. So there's that.
Can you hire someone on a consultant type line,
yeah,
provisional, so that you can 6 months later, they're not in the union, if they work out, they work out, and if not.
Well, I looked into that a little bit, but I don't know the final answer. I mean, the problem the flag that was raised is that we don't need somebody really high level, like a consultant high level, to talk about policy changes or that sort of thing. What we really need is administrative assistance. So we're looking for data entry and that sort of thing, and website updates, and yeah. So that doesn't.
I understand what it is you need.
The
I'm just,
city makes job descriptions very, very tight.
Okay, 1 minute, Sean. They don't have, does the city still have the college aides? Because that can probably help you to alleviate, you know, having, you
Yeah.
have a college aide come in and.
So I don't know what the city, how you get it through the city, but there, you know, there are ways for us to reach out. But again, then it's like training somebody who's temporary, and then they can't be alone in the office. And we're only working one person at a time in the office right now, and having that person work remotely, then there's a lack of supervision. So it just is, it could work. It just is difficult to put a lot of work in for something that you just don't know if it's gonna work. But anyway, we'll figure it out.
Are there any list out that you can hire maybe a clerk or a community associate?
That would then be a union staff.
Yeah, but why are you against union?
I'm not against unions. Please believe me when I tell you that.
Okay.
But I need to be able to ensure that the probation period for that employee needs to be, we need to use that to ensure that the employee is working out before we make them permanent.
Well, with union employees, they're usually a probation of a year. So, you know, so
Okay.
I don't see, you know, what's the issue with that?
All right, I'll get back to work on it. So
I sort of wonder how, can I jump back in? I wonder how a probationary period of a year for the transition in a category from temporary to, or like an adjunct in some way, to a full-time, or now being vested position would respond to a reduction of monies in the future, just as an, oh, by the way.
you can't do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I would hire, and actually we would hire somebody on a part-time basis for now.
Okay.
Maybe bring them up to full-time in the future.
Because there's some really good points in there. But in any case, I have total faith in you. Thank you.
We'll see. Thank you. All right, so we kind of skipped around, and I'm just gonna quickly go through some of these things. You know, expanding street outreach for homeless is something I just want to maintain as a high priority. It's something that we continue to need, and we see, and we hear concerns and complaints, and we work very closely with Breaking Ground, but it takes something like 250 encounters for a street homeless person to accept services. So we need somebody to talk to somebody once a day. And our calls about that have escalated for sure. I'm going from the wrong notes. I kind of wanted to bunch these all together. So expanding the street outreach and increasing homeless prevention programs. I'm concerned that, you know, as many people are, that people will, that eviction proceedings may escalate in the near future. And so maintaining services for people who are at risk will be a priority. Again, it fits into our mission. Flipping back. Yeah, so homeless outreach, additional home security programs. Then, and to HPD, a request to maintain at the housing stock that exists now. I mean, when the mayor talks about adding new affordable units, I think they usually talk about a net number. Sorry, I don't mean that. They talk about a gross number. They talk about what they've added. And there's not a lot of talk about what's falling away, you know, what no longer is available, and there's no mention of some of the affordable housing that exists is substandard housing. So I mentioned that we have a very high rent overburdened population. We also have one of the highest rent unit overcrowding statistics in the city. And then get this, according to HPD, this is measured by the number of HPD violations and along the lines of most serious, less serious, moderately serious violations. Measuring along those lines, only 40% of the units in our district are considered adequately maintained. So it might be affordable, but it's not adequate. And so I think, you know, HPD inspectors and the ability of HPD to move in and correct violations is a budget priority that I think is screaming out in this district. So that's kind of the housing. I'm going to try to move through on themes so we get all of the issues that are related to one theme done at a time. Any questions or concerns about that? Okay.
Yeah, no, I'd just like to say that I think these are really important, and unless something changes in the state when people will be allowed to be evicted come January 1st, it's really important that these agencies ramp up as much as they can.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to solve problems by creating problems. Okay, and then of course, I mean, there's no mention of this, but as we all know, we're going to be hosting a shelter, 200 men, general population shelter, I guess in 2 years that they're building now on Duryea Place. So our DOT requests are traffic and parking studies. I might move this down as it's not mission related. And DOT has decreased public input in everything that they're installing in the district. They come to us with plans instead of proposals now. But I do want to ensure that some of the programs that they're not even asking us about that are, you know, sometimes fine programs, but could sometimes benefit from community input. But I want to just make sure that those installations that there's a maintenance budget for them. So for instance, when they put the pedestrian islands, we're having a devil of a time trying to get anybody to maintain the pedestrian islands on Coney Island Avenue and Avenue M. The weeds are up higher than the cars, but nobody's responsible for weed whacking those weeds. DOT had entered into an agreement with Parks to do it, but Parks no longer has the capacity to do it, so nobody does it. The bike lane maintenance is something that we, you know, kind of sewed into the letter when they asked us for support, that they had made a commitment that they were going to maintain the bike lanes. And then I'm having a really hard time getting DOT to repair anybody who's in the neighborhood around Beverly and East 16th Street and wants to go check out the East 16th Street dead end. You may be surprised at the condition of the walls at the end of that. The wall is like, it's like it's like falling apart. There's graffiti all over it and it's literally falling down. And DOT said, oh, we're not sure if that's our responsibility. Well, whose responsibility would it be? Of course it's the responsibility. So you know, just getting them, they put the new toys in, but they're not taking care of the toys they have. So that's going to stay in the budget request, but kind of move down because it's not a public health or economic recovery request. HPD, I already talked about. DEP, we would like for them to pay attention to the same 5 or 6 flooding locations that we've been bringing to their attention for the past 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years. We want to maintain that request. I'm going quickly now, so stop me if I'm going too fast or if there's something you want to chime in on. NYPD crossing guards, I'm going to actually move that down, but that's because there aren't as many students going to school, and that we've been told that the crossing guards we do have, that we have our total allotment filled. So I could maintain it so that we could have even more, but NYPD was having trouble filling those. People weren't applying for the jobs. They couldn't fill the slots that they had. And I'm also not sure if they're changing, and this kind of goes to Hindy's question earlier. I think crossing guards is one of those things they're taking out of the NYPD budget and putting it either into DOT traffic or maybe even the DOE budget. So I'm not even sure where that sits and who we're asking.
Sean, I think lowering it makes sense,
Okay.
given the low demand and that issue, yeah.
All right, cool. And then we'll ratchet it back up when we need it again next year or the year after. We talked about Newkirk Plaza and that we're going to ask DOT, MTA, and EDC to all, take a look at this request, especially, again, a need for outdoor space. The issues that we're seeing on Newkirk Plaza, and many of you see this with your own 2 eyes, have just been exacerbated since COVID. I mean, complaints about homeless populations, concerns about crime there, and just sort of like just the general maintenance and sanitation. That's all been exacerbated since COVID. And these are the very issues that DOT boasts that their plaza programs mitigate. So we'll maintain that. And remember, the mayor said that he would do this for us 2 years ago.
Sean, question on that.
Uh-huh.
Why are we framing it as expand public programming? It just seems like I don't know, a strange articulation to me, based on what we're asking for.
Yeah, me too. It must have been some language that was being bandied about last year, but I'll drop it and just say expand public space for community use.
Yeah, sounds good.
I think maybe expanding public programming was sort of the DOT, the plaza language.
Okay.
I feel like I copied that from somebody. That doesn't.
Yeah, this is Dwayne. I'm sorry. Yeah, we were trying to see if somehow we could get DOT to designate it a plaza, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Because there was confusion about, there was always the confusion about who owns what space and who's responsible for what. So I think that if I remember correctly, that's what the language was from.
Yeah, that's probably it. But Steve, the other thing, and everybody, this is for everybody. The other thing is that Hillel Plaza, which we had, I confess having some resistance toward, but now that plaza is functioning, their public programming at that plaza now includes a safe street for restaurants, a homework hub. It's also been like a food distribution site. I've actually expressed concern that they're doubling up on so many activities that how are they doing all of these things and maintaining distancing? But if there's that many programs in one plaza, it sort of demonstrates that we would be able to program up another one.
Before you move on, one quick thing that I didn't hear in the DHS, the Department of Homeless Services, and that's food pantry. Is that something that we're including in the budgeting this year or not at this time?
We can, but that wouldn't actually be a DHS request. I mean, that went through a number of different agencies. I think it was a task force and OEM and DOE, but I will figure out how to aim it and request for food pantry.
That's great, Sean. Thank you very much.
No, good point. For Department of Buildings, I also want to request additional, what do you call it, inspectors. Because we have more sites, those sites are going, we have sites that were stalled and now going back online. We want to expedite those projects so that they don't maintain construction sites. We also want to, DOB should, because they're inspecting more, to ensure that they're being COVID compliant. I think an increase in inspectors is not an outlandish request, and that it should actually be pretty high up there, because I do consider it a sort of public health and safety issue. DYCD, we were talking offline a little bit before we got started officially with Dwayne about, there's so many programs. We focus a lot on SYEP because of our the youth conference, but there are a lot of programs. DYCD is just a funding agency. They don't provide any direct programming. They provide grants to our community-based organizations. So we need the CBOs to go for the funding in order to want them to increase the funding, but we can do that. And for sure, this is a recovery item. Both when they say youth and community development, first of all, youth goes up to the early 20s, and community development is all of us. So continued funding to expand and provide bridge funding for programs that had to stall during it was one of the sentences I wanted to slip into what we already asked for. Anything on that? Because I know this is this board holds this near and dear, so I'll pause.
It's Jonathan. I think that that's the best we could hope for right now. We really don't know what the lay of the land is going to be, and we don't know if there will be the ability to really predict what kind of job openings there might be for summer next year. So, but at least if we put it in there, hopefully enough boards do that, and the city won't forget about it, and we'll keep the funding there should things really be in a good place for, the SYEP next year. So, and I'm fine with that that addition that you want to make.
Okay, that's great. And they did talk a little bit at the budget consultation about, about shifting into more remote programming. They were able to do that even within budget constraints because there were savings from things that weren't happening that, they then shifted over. Department of Parks and Recreation. We talked about this a little bit with capital, but in terms of what they do outside of parks, on our streets, on our very tree-lined, leafy, big branchy streets, where when there are bad storms and trees topple over, they pull up entire sidewalks. The Department of Parks and Recreation has done I don't know if I should put the onus on them. I'm going to say they've done a terrible job maintaining their contractors. I don't know if it's because of them or there's something wrong where they've had so many contracting issues. I mean, you might remember the dog run got delayed because the contractor left and they had to rebid it out. The tot lot got delayed because they had to rebid it out. They said in the aftermath of the storm this past fall, they had 2 contractors leave in the middle of picking up tree branches. We had sanitation doing the works, their job, plus picking up tree branches where they could. There's right now no sidewalks contract. Doesn't exist. There isn't one. So if your sidewalk erupts because of tree roots, you now can leave it like that indefinitely, or you can have it fixed and then not sue the city. Well, it is suing the city, then file a claim with the comptroller's office. That's what Parks is telling you to do. They're like, just, fix it and sue us. So, this is a huge problem. And it's obviously, it's obviously, to me, it's still tied into public safety, public health. So I want to keep this on the request, move it up from 11th. And
now, Sean, if somebody trips over the broken sidewalk because of the tree roots, who do they sue?
Well, as long as the homeowner has called it into 311 and it's in the system as pending, then the city becomes responsible for it.
Okay, thank you.
The comptroller did a report about I think this was falling limbs. I think in the early days of Scott Stringer as comptroller, there was a falling limbs report. I'll try to find it and send it out to all of you, and what it costs the city when tree branches fall down. And then we've even had the tragedy of it costing people their lives. So there's that. I see a need as we're sending more people into the parks for longer periods of time. We also need an increase in the park enforcement patrol so that everything isn't call the police, call the police, call the police. PEP did a really good job mitigating a situation that we had over in the parade grounds this summer. And I think for more support for an expansion of their personnel would be very useful. And then finally, here's another thing that like just blows my mind. Department of Parks and Recreation has 1 exterminator for the borough of Brooklyn. And did I mention rats? There's a lot of rats. So increasing that also. I think that's it. Contractors, sidewalks, pruning, tree branch response, Oh, tree plantings, park enforcement personnel and exterminators. And I'm going to try to bunch that into not so many requests, but get it all to parks.
So can I jump in on contractors, please? So regarding contractors who are fall in the MWBE categories, they tend to be awarded on a bottom line bid. So if the task is not I mean, there are repercussions if the job is not completed, they're not allowed to bid going forward, or they're not viewed with favor and likely to win the award. But nonetheless, on a bottom line bid, there can be real. And I think that's possibly why we're seeing some of these jobs that are scoped and awarded but abandoned midway, just as a point.
Yeah, no, that's good insight. But you know, another thing that the public sector can do when it can't engage the private sector is to fund the public sector to do it. I mean, forestry used to be its own unit. They didn't used to vet that out. They used to just do it. It's so that might be, they might have to just rethink how it gets done and hire their own personnel, which is, these are not the budget days for that, but they certainly aren't gaining efficiency, right? Which is why we send things out to the private sector. So fail. DSS and DHS, I thought I covered this up above, but it's still on my list. You know, just additional supporting funding for mental health support, both with the street outreach teams and generally speaking, because we've all heard and perhaps know that social distancing and health anxiety and school anxiety and working from home with people in your house all together in a room anxiety has certainly created mental health tensions. And so support for our fellow man and fellow woman will be maintained in our requests. I'm getting rid of a request for additional patrol cars for NYPD. They say they don't need them. They are up to par. We will add food pantry. We will do a lot to support senior services because COVID, this will also be ratcheted up on our list to be a higher priority. Senior services, COVID certainly underscored the difficulty in servicing isolated seniors. The whole point of a senior center is to offer seniors an opportunity to not be isolated, and they were all shut down, continue to be shut down. Outreach to homebound, the senior centers pivoted to a food delivery program, and they actually have a new RFP out for that. I think we should support that, and support their, even though it's a volunteer program, it still takes some staff to run the volunteer visiting program for seniors. And then sort of, I was thinking along the same lines as we talked about with libraries is, you know, whether or not there could be some funding for senior centers to begin to reimagine whether or not they could be open depending on the health crisis and depending on the vulnerability of the people they do serve, whether there is a model which you could do sort of like the schools are doing, you know, some remote and some on-site service provision. But I'd like for us to talk a lot about seniors. We are in our population seems to have gone down since 2010 a little bit, but the percentage of our population that are seniors over the age of 65 has actually increased from 9.8% in 2010 to 14.5% in 2018. And that ranks us 12th out of 59 community boards in the city, which surprised me. And then here's also something to consider and be concerned about. The poverty rate among seniors who are 65 and over is 26.4%. So it's higher than our overall poverty rate. And it ranks us 23rd overall, which I don't know, that's not as bad as I thought it would be. Okay. Anybody want to say anything about seniors? We're thumbs up on seniors, right? Good, because I'm about to be one. Okay, FDNY. One thing FDNY asked us to support was an expansion or continuation of their detector installation. This is a program that's funded through the next fiscal year because they had to stop it in the current fiscal year. So so they've got it moving forward, but they don't know that it will be renewed in the current budget situation. But since 70% of fatalities in residential fires are in homes that did not have a detector, it's an extremely valuable program. I mean, obviously, on its face. So here comes the language again, Steve. Activation of city-owned sites. We talked, it was in our previous budget request to activate the church in Bedford location, which now, as we mentioned, HPD has announced with EDC and the council member that's going to turn into an affordable housing development. At one point, I'm told they were considering a park, but it's going to be housing. And then we'll try to get the East 15th Street MTA site activated. That might not even be a budget request. That might just be like a lease agreement that they have up by Kew Gardens and, you know, like up by East 18th Street and the Brighton Line station at Church. Yeah, and then sanitation I have on my list next. We're getting there, everybody. Children's services. I'm going to change the wording on that a little bit. I mean, I think that the concerns there are really dire. The reported suspected abuse cases dropped by something like 50% during COVID times because there were no mandated reporters coming in contact with vulnerable children. Obviously, there was almost no schools, so reports of suspected abuse by educators dropped 81%. So what ACS says that they're concerned about is this sort of pent up demand and a concern that caseload is going to increase in ways that they need to be prepared for. So we're going to make a request and bring it up higher than 19th for continued funding to maintain. I forget what the numbers are. I should have written them down in my notes. I'll have to go back through, but there was a caseload number that we'll ask them to maintain. This came from our consultation with them. So at their request and due to obvious need. So we already talked about DIFTA, Newkirk Plaza, sanitation, EDC. You know, we talked about their broadband, increasing broadband, and their.
Sean, since you mentioned that the percentage of seniors is going up, if that seems to be an ongoing trend, then maybe number 20, where you're asking for a new senior center, might be moved up a little bit.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think I was going to keep them together. What I was talking about with services and programs and new centers, I'm going to keep all of the DIFTA requests more together. That's just sort of how I'm going to organize it differently, because these lists are really funny, the way the city makes us do it. We still maintain very stubbornly this habit of when I put it into the district needs statement, I don't prioritize it. I just kind of make everything like, I have several number ones. Our number one priority with police is this, our number one priority with parks is that, and our number one priority with aging is that, because I think it's just not okay for the city to ask us whether we're going to prioritize police over senior citizens or children over housing, or, I mean, these are all intertwined things. Nothing is more important than the other. They all work, you know, in tandem with one another. So so the way I hope to print it out next year is to keep all of the agencies together. So, you know, DIFTA, school, DOT. So it won't be as crazy next year. Maybe.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
So it'll be a new type of mapping, right? So you'll have arrows unpicking the snarls. I wanted to jump in mainly because when we were talking about the MTA and their longer term capital with accessibility, their funding program that was approved for Church Avenue BQ station. On the back side of that lot, on the Caton side, there's that exit has an opportunity there for a little bit of green spacing if they'll manage and oversee it. It's a fairly broad area that could be used, put some bushes in there and some, allocate somebody to go sweep it, water some plants and put them in pots. But it's a vacant area that could.
We would have to get somebody in the community to adopt it, Ann, because MTA won't even shovel more than 3 feet away from really that's their rule. They have a 3-foot rule. So they only maintain things that are within 3 feet of their station house entrance. The entrance, not even the whole facility. But it's a good idea to bring to Kew Gardens attention if they want to expand what they do over there or something like that, or find a community group that wants to do it. So it's probably in Oded Holziger's report. I just don't remember if that's a spot that he identified or not.
Thank you.
But taken. Yeah, thank you. We're on the last 2 of things already written down, and we already talked about libraries. So I'll skip on to canine waste. We'll keep trying. So that's all that was in ours from last year. And the things that I'm adding are one thing. I don't know if Dwayne is still here because he said he might have to leave early. But we were talking about, this Small Business Services has a workforce office and a business solutions center, and they do WMBE certification. And I think that we haven't asked for this before, but in my consultation with them, and then in a follow-up meeting I did with them that was organized by Officer Michael Joseph in the 7-0, they were talking a lot about these programs, and they seem really critical to, economic and job loss recovery. So I'd like to add that in this year and bring it up pretty high. Then try to get, rats. So DPR will ask more for some exterminator funding for parks, exterminator funding for MTA so that they do more abatement along their tracks. They tend to do it only when we ask for it and report problems. And then I know they have a regular schedule, but more please. FDNY detector installs. Oh, and for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, we'll add on a request for contact tracing support and other data collection and prevention plans to address ongoing recovery and response to the COVID-19 pandemic. That's it.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could all give you a virtual standing ovation on that. You were fantastic. Thank you all board members for being so active, participating so well. There's a reason why Board 14 is regarded among many as one of the more effective community boards in the city of New York, and it's because of you. So thank you, everyone. If there is no additional business,
let me just say to follow up, so I'm going to relist these out, get them in order as discussed, and then I will provide it to the board in advance of our November 9th public hearing, because the public hearing is when we bring this into the public to ratify and then send to the city as is. So that will be my to-do to get back to you on all of this.
Thank you, Sean. Any additional comments or questions before we wrap it up?
Yeah, so I haven't seen yet the letter regarding the conditions under which the board suggested approval for the 1600 to 1620. Is there, because I think their public hearing for the borough office immediately follows our meeting Isn't it a matter of days?
So I agreed to put the conditions into writing. And remember, I want the board members to remember that this is a recommendation that you are all making to yourselves at our regular board meeting. So it's not, it's not set in stone yet. And just so you all know this, that, we continue to get petitions into the office. So, but yeah, so the conditions will be in writing. That will also be sent to the board prior to the November 9th meeting, because I think because there's so many of them, it would only be fair that you all have a chance to take a look at them before you're voting on them at the meeting. So, and I'll be in touch with Richard Barrick as we write them. It's not, the Borough Hall won't find, there will be no surprises for Borough Hall.
I guess what I'm asking is, would it be helpful to you if there are certain items that we brought forward that we spoke on that we should submit to you for inclusion quickly?
If there's anything you want to email to make sure that I've got it, you're welcome to do that. But we have the meeting recorded, and Anya captured the chat. And so I think we've got it. But if there's something you want to make sure of, yes, by all means, feel free to send an email. And remember that if somehow still it gets missed, there's an opportunity to add conditions at the regular meeting of the board before it's all ratified.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, hearing no one, I just want to mention that I'm going to put in for a salary increase for all the board members. And we're going to wrap up this meeting at 8:24 p.m. on October 27th. Thank you all for participating.
Thanks, everybody. Send me anything you forgot to mention tonight.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Everyone.